Hello, everyone. Good morning to our friends in the Americas, good evening to everyone from the Asia-Pacific region, and good afternoon from sunny Frankfurt to all of our friends in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Welcome to part 5 of the Lufthansa Systems online conference series, Let's Talk About IT. I'm your host, James Liu. Before we begin, please note that this Skype call is being recorded and will be available on our website after the session. Your microphones are muted by default, however, you are invited to post your questions throughout the session in the chat window. If questions remain open due to time constraints, you are welcome to get in touch with us directly and we will be happy to continue the discussion with you. So joining me today on the panel are Davide Badelli, our Director Consultant here at Lufthansa Systems. Davide has over 20 years of airline experience in the areas of flight planning processes, airline ops control, air traffic management, and management of change. Davide was the former head of dispatch in a few European airlines and is experienced in developing operational organizations, as well as in CESAR research and development and CESAR deployment. Hello, Davide.
Hello, everyone.
Our next speaker is Björn Bech, our senior consultant here at Lufthansa Systems. Björn has over 20 years of experience in the areas of ops control and airport operations. Prior to joining Lufthansa Systems in 2019, Björn held various roles at Air Berlin in the airport operations, hub management, and ticketing areas. Björn has also been involved in a startup of Small Planet Airlines in Germany as the head of ground operations and safety. Hello, Björn.
Hello, everyone, and welcome.
A little bit about myself. I'm a management consultant here at Lufthansa Systems. I have 15 years of experience in the network planning, scheduling, and revenue management areas in airlines such as Qatar Airways, Virgin Australia, and Qantas before joining Lufthansa Systems here in Frankfurt early last year. Today we will be talking about the current state of airline operations around the world, as well as how operations control could be managed better during and after the pandemic. We will start by looking at the current state of the industry and the impact of the reduced passenger demand on operational reliability and on-time performance at airlines. This is followed by an overview of two-tier ops control model and how it can be used to manage the rapidly changing environment. Then we will look at how the two-tier ops control model can help overcome some obstacles at the so-called integrated operational control center, before we discuss how to adapt the new normal in the post-pandemic world and how the two-tiered ops control model can be used as an opportunity for improving the OCC. After all that, we will then open the floor up for some question and answers from the viewers. The agenda for today. So, to set the mood and kick off the discussion, what can you tell us, Davide? How much has the world changed for airlines in the world of ops control?
Well, thank you, James. Let me start with something that posed a lot of challenges up to some time ago to the ops control. Can you please switch? Oh, thank you very much. What you see on the slide was a day last year, the 9th of May 2019. There was one of the, I would say, worst days in the European aviation, at least for this century, where the airlines flying around Europe really had a nightmare day, where a lot of delay has been posed on their operations by air traffic management, and a lot of additional costs. So in the single day, this is an estimation done by Eurocontrol, this delay costed more than 20 millions for an average delay to each aircraft flying in Europe of around 15 million. From the perspective of the airlines, that was pretty, let's say, as I said, a nightmare, because it was posing an additional burden on the shoulder of the ones who are generating revenue of additional more than 500 millions to recover profitability. So that happened in a single day, and that was posing a lot of challenges on ops control. but something then happened. And that problem, that back in those days looked the problem with really the problem, too much traffic or too little capacity, suddenly disappeared, isn't it, Bjorn?
Well, definitely it is, David, and it's really interesting to look at 1 year after. So today we are seeing the demand in the current flight situation from last year to what it is 1 year later, that the passenger figures have declined and the flight numbers have declined by almost 90%. And it's ridiculous to see airports every week. I'm going back and forth to Frankfurt each week, and I have to admit that it was really scary at the first days, like being at the airport, seeing nobody there, no queues at security control. That is something which we normally are not used to, and especially in our operations control are not used to. So what does it actually mean, David, for our day-to-day operation now?
Right. I think that to answer to that question, we need to broaden a bit our view, what's happening today and what most probably will happen also in the next years from now. We are entering the domain of the global crisis, in fact, and the ops control needs to get ready for that. Next slide, James, thanks. I would say that about 10 years ago, I read a book written by a meteorologist that came back to my memory recently at the beginning of our current crisis, because it indicated in this year, the year 2020, the beginning of what this book called the domain of the global crisis that will heavily affect our lives. And at the same time, it has located the problem on a specific phenomenon, that is the exponential growth. So this effect, doubling and doubling again and doubling again, that we are experiencing tragically right now. And also pointing out that we are not used to grasp the risks of this exponential growth well in advance, and when the problems are still far from reaching the limits. Well, here we are now. We have never seen so many crises altogether. You see some of those on the screen, pandemics being just the last one. And we have tragically noted the non-linear effects of this crisis. Well, why I'm saying that, and this has an impact, has let's say, an influence on ops control. It is because it looks like definitely that the state of crisis is becoming a permanent attribute of our everyday life, which requires investing a lot in resilience and in smart moves. The next slide, please. So what is the imperative of today? So if we are entering the domain of global crisis, what is this current crisis telling us? That we have a very clear imperative, which is guarding the border between the human world and the virus sphere. And that's why, because as long as the virus exists and it can mutate or evolve somewhere, it can always spread again anywhere. And that's why most of the world's population, as we are unfortunately experiencing, is now subject to social distancing measures, actually to help creating this border. And what should we expect for the next future? Clearly, and unfortunately, an alternate between periods of severe distancing and times of softened measures. This is to preserve our lives and living. It will be unfortunately, the distinctive mark of our times. And this is the conclusion we wanted to draw from here, that we need to accept this reality in our private life, but also in our work. We have to work out the best way to live and work in this unprecedented time. And that's why we are now introducing the other imperative of these days, which is actually building a border between the virus and the business. In fact, in times like this, what is critical is to remain vigilant on workforce and passengers' protection and adopt all the measures necessary for securing both, on one hand, biological safety, on the other hand, business continuity at the same time. And operations control executives do have really a duty in this regard, a responsibility, the responsibility to rapidly take initiatives to create this border. Many have already done that. In fact, until there is a treatment basically, or a vaccine for COVID-19, Ops control room will be opportunities for infected people to infect others. Workplace spread of the virus is unfortunately a real threat. So the executives, therefore, are required to make decisions that affect not only the health of their business and the health of their employees, but also the health of the families of those employees. So it's a rather critical task they are asked to put in place, an effort they are asked to put in place, and very, very rapidly. So we don't really have answers in that direction. What will be, let's say, the best solution? Having a clear understanding of what solution will work better, will take some time. But the crisis is now showing the direction. That's what we would like to point out in this talk today.
Yeah.
We don't have to waste what we are learning in these days. Isn't that, Bjorn?
And thank you for mentioning that. So it's what do we actually learn something already during the past month? And we highlighted that in the blog post already about the COVID-19 crisis. At the beginning of the lockdown in Europe, a two-tier ops control model can be actually a pragmatic model to protect the workforce and to secure business continuity at one go. So a clever move to increase resilience and establish a safe operating process. We have recommended to implement an ops control model around an on-site decision-making core and where crucial functions are represented. It's the minimum viable unit, easier to protect the appropriate always-on measures. And there is a production working layer remotely distributed in space. So when we're talking about production are those functions to support decision-making and by producing flight plans, crew rosters, maintenance, schedules, and reports, something you don't need by day-to-day operations in your decision-making unit, but you require the task and that adapt throughout the decided course of action. This is as well the trend we have observed in these months, dictated by the emergence and urgency to really move on in these critical times. The attempt to split between a core and a non-core decision-making unit. It's an imperfect and in the most cases not the minimum viable to hold at least possible potential of infections. The attempt to have a production spread out in space along with all the issues is something that like that is posing. So forced by the events, these attempts have been successfully to some extent, to many extents in some cases, to survive the initial shock. So we believe that by the high time now to turn these efforts which you have already put in place to form that into a formal two-tier ops model and to set the framework and conditions to make sure to have a long-term sustainability.
Yeah, and Bjorn, sorry if I interrupt. I think that this idea of sustainability is definitely the point, because we are staying in this crisis mode for long. That's why it is really important to make what you have already maybe put in place. Many ops control executives with some measures here and there, they turn it into a stable model. Good point.
Yes, and that's the important. And we like to go even a step further. So we're at the age we're moving the time to reconsider the traditional all under one roof ops control setup. That means implement the model what you have now, and because it will, and let it stay. You see on the screen 3 high-level moves to turn the effort into a model that stays. So we would like to focus especially on the third one, learn to play the game in a world of social distancing and remote working. That means that we need to take remote methods that have already been launched in a hurry and in place in the face of emergency to the status of full sustainability. It's something we need to make sure that because it will last longer, and in fact, remote and smart working is not more than giving people a laptop, isn't it? It's so when we think about the ops control remote working, which is almost a known world so far in ops control, but critical to actually run a safe operating space, but difficult to imagine it works simply by providing people a laptop to the staff, because we were used to work basically always under one roof. Therefore, to actually make this two-tier model possible, some pieces are still missing and need to be addressed quickly. We have to put in place like clear rules, certainly for workers and company, which detail every aspect of the new world, from tools to security, of connections to the respect for the privacy, from obligations to guarantee, and from availability for the right to disconnect. Develop guidelines which set the boundaries for your employees and design a workplace accordingly. So by leveraging as well the existing technology, let's admit that we were taken aback by the amount of solutions already available in our day-to-day work by the distance. And most probably further capabilities will come very soon, because looking at the investments done by the big 5 American companies for research and development already in this year, it's in the single first quarter, the big 5 invested 29 million euros in the development, in the research and development in that area, which is 17% more than to what they spent last year. So we see that the smart working solution are advancing. So make sure that your infrastructure is in place and that you know how to use it. So that will maybe require as well to have to reskill your workforce, because staff need to adapt and to do the complete new approach. And do not underestimate the impact this can have on them and help them to move from one side to the other. As well, adapt processes and roles in the new way of interacting. Rethink the decision-making process. What if not all people you require for the decision-making are at one place and sitting next to the other as they used to be? Or how are information shared throughout the team and distributed always that everybody is aware of what is actually going on? And do I have to rearrange maybe handover session, for example? And if you're an ops control leader, there is the necessity to reconsider how do you actually ensure that your leadership is appropriate and you are able to keep track of your people, assess their work and their decisions, and maybe like in the past days you were sitting next to them and could say, well, could help them with decision making. This is maybe not the case currently anymore. So you have to rethink about how you deal with that. And you have to think about as well as informal interactions. So there's the experience about the people, how to actually exchange and learn about what they're facing and what the issues are, and give them the possibility to have a virtual exchange. So maybe by have a virtual coffee in order to have the chat which you used to have at the coffee machine in order to exchange. So it would be a serious mistake if to reduce smart working to just an imposed parenthesis pending to return to normal work. Normal is going to be this new way of working. So the change of these days is not reversible anymore. And ops control will certainly be no exception. So don't hesitate in the moment of crisis, and minds can change quickly.
So this is quite interesting, because traditionally, from a OCC perspective, everyone's, like you said, it's under one roof. So it's going to be very big changes, right? Like if you are going to manage this social distancing and changing the way to remote work or partial remote work.
I think it's for many people it already changed. So
Yeah.
there are already changes implemented, and
Yeah.
it's not an emergency anymore. So that's why we're talking about, and Davide mentioned that earlier, we're talking about sustainability. We need to make sure that what we created, that it will not be an emergency setup. So we have to rethink if that's maybe the new normal, and it's going to last as longer than we expect it to be. So put it make sure that it is really sustainable. And so that's what we say by formalizing like the new two-tier ops model and letting it stay and increase resilience and reduce the major risk in the future. So we are, however, that it doesn't come at no cost. We know that it's nothing is for free. In the past, to persuade ourselves to retract what we have worked for years is long. The creation of integrated operations control, where being all under one roof, has been considered by many as a cornerstone so far. So that's what you're referring to.
Definitely.
It's a paradigm shift. So let's see if there's an additional reason for such a decision as well to sustain such a move in the long run and to let the model stay. In fact, we believe that a properly implemented two-tier ops model gives the right focus on key responsibilities of operational control in the long run.
That's definitely very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that's the right question. In fact, okay, we understand it's the right moment now to formalize what have been done so far. So the effort spent on creating the border into a model that can stay because of the prolonged crisis mode. But at the same time, it would be easier to convince ourselves that this formalization, let's say consolidation around a model is worth. Also, if we look at something different, if this model can help us in doing a step forward. So we believe that this move, this formalization in this two-tier model can also help in fixing the current issues of the integrated ops control, so the AIOCC, or whatever we want to call it, and there are several different names, but the I is always there. So we have visited tens of operations control centers in the recent years, and we got a clear feeling that the concept, so this I in front of OCC, AOC, whatever, has still many, I would say, fallacies, many flaws, and in many, many cases. Let's review some of those flaws. And let's see also if then the two-tier ops control, this can help in that direction, also in overcoming those flaws. You see on the slide there is the term buzzword. Many cases we had, unfortunately, the impression that talking about integration was mainly a slogan. So let's review some of those problems, those issues. In our view, in our experience, the very first one is that the vision and the targets of this integrated ops control has not been communicated very well to all the departments that are involved, so within the ops control room, but at the same time the interfacing processes, because they contribute a lot to that, to the targets of the ops control. So this is the first problem: vision and mindset, because the vision sets the mindset there. The second problem we noticed in many cases is lack of process definition. So processes that are kind of smoky, defined, and lack of knowledge. In many cases, I know very well my own process, but I don't know the process of the one who's sitting just a few desks beside me. And
so you can put everyone into the same room, but then they still don't talk to each other, or they still don't understand each other. That's what you're saying.
Correct, James, correct. So the knowledge of also what the others are doing can improve my contribution. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that still is, in many cases, missing, as well as the famous process and IT integration. So systems and processes that are not really matching, or understanding of the tools. I remember my time when I was a flight dispatcher.
Mm-hmm.
I used in some cases to complain about something that in my view the system could not do, but that was mainly because I didn't know that the system could actually.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that we notice as well in many cases, and that can also help in the direction of integration. There are some others. You can switch to the other slide, James, please. Another that is very, very important, I mentioned already the communicating the targets, but also defining the right KPIs and making sure that the functions, they have their own KPIs, but those KPIs are aligned to the targets, to the goals. I might have some fun example in that direction, but this is one of the major problems that's still preventing this I to become a real I and not just a slogan. Distinguish routine from non-routine. What does that mean? That means that we like to talk about management by exception because everyone likes to have to work in an environment where all the routine is done by the system and I can focus on decision making. The problem is that managed by exception, it's not just a gift. It comes as the result of very precise assessment and analysis in your organization. Then you can pick up the right system for working in that new way, in the way where you can really focus on decision making. So the very first and missing piece in many organizations is distinguishing the routine and non-routine. A critical task. Again, distribution of decision outcomes. So whenever the decision maker in the ops control do make a decision, we have to make sure that this is executed properly downstream. Still an open issue in many cases. Or competence management, lessons learned. It looks like in many cases that every day is a new one, but the problems are always the same, but we kind of take with the problems as they are new as well. So
yeah.
Creating a competence, a management system, a knowledge management system that can help really in that direction will pay off.
Can I just say something, because I feel like it's also some challenges is similar in different parts of an airline as well, right? Like when you have someone doing one job and then they leave, and then the rest of the people have to relearn what that person knows as well. If you don't have what you're mentioning here, a competence management process and system, so everyone are up to speed with the knowledge and the competences at the same level.
Exactly, and competence is also much broader, and there are concepts now out of ICAO that really address the topic of competence in ops control that are very, very interesting. And we might say that maybe the new frontier will be really competency-based decision making, but it's not. This is not the place where to talk about that. You're right. We are in the year 2020, but we still we suffer of the same problems. And back in the 90s, when the AIOCC concept was created.
So just before you go on, David, I just want to let our viewers and listeners know that the messaging app on the side of the window is now open if anyone wants to put their questions and comments for our speakers to answer going forward. So please type it into the message box on the left. Sorry, David, please go on.
Yeah, I'm through these slides. And basically what I wanted to say, these 8 categories are the ones that we mostly noticed by visiting OCC, and in our view are really still the obstacles to be overcome to really move toward a real I in front of OCC, and not just having all under one roof, but still working in the famous silos. I give the floor back to Bjorn now. Just because we believe that's something that we are now entering the right moment, and the crisis is offering us with all this pain, the associated pain, but the opportunity to do something to overcome those issues. Isn't it, Bjorn?
Well, it is for sure, and I would say see it as a chance, the change. So when we look back at the model for now, and James, would you move to the next slide, please?
Okay.
So because the proposed two-tier model we were talking about, is a need to move to a secure workforce protection and business continuity. So, but is offering at once a unique chance for everybody to actually move towards an integrated ops control, as you were talking about, Davide. In fact,
really integrated, not just under one roof. Maybe this time is done.
Not just to sit together and that's it.
Absolutely, not sitting in one room and not working together, actually, by breaking up the silos. So, in fact, the model requires and fosters decisive steps in order in the direction of digitization. I think you really mentioned that, and it's important and to have a good system integration to actually integrate the flow of information you're receiving every day and exploit sustainably the new ways of collaboration we have been discovering in these times. So collaboration and an agile culture, moving from lines and silos to actual teamwork and networks. So by fostering the competencies and to be the new driver of decision making, we have to embrace like the culture of an AIOCC to just like have the continuous improvement idea always on our mind and to have an accountability culture. These people are making the decision and spending the money in our operation each day to make them accountable for what they actually working. Therefore, it's a good reason for the decision to move to a two-tier ops control model, and a good reason to let the model stay as we were talking about. If properly implemented, a two-tier model pays back in the short term by creating the boundary between the virus and the business. But we're looking at it, and it gives at the same time the right focus and key responsibility of ops control in the long run, and it will pay off for sure.
Right. Okay. Good point.
So I think it's now good time to summarize a bit, and I will give it to you, Davide, to give you a summary about what we talked about.
Exactly. So it was a kind of brief introduction, and we are definitely open to further discussion in other moments about that. But basically, what we wanted to discuss, basically, we are entering a crisis mode that is staying. Many have already implemented really measures in very different ways to try to protect at one go the business, so business continuity and the health of their employees. And we realized by looking into the efforts spent so far by many that they are moving in several different ways in a common direction, that is toward a two-tier model. We believe that now, and this was part of our discussion, it is the moment, let's say, to substantiate, to formalize the model around really a two-tier ops control. And we also discussed that there are good reasons for doing that. On one hand, because this is the way to sustain what have been done so far for the next years. But at the same time, because it offers the chance of overcoming some of the most important, the key issues of the current eye in front of the OCC, of the current integrated ops control approach. So we believe that this is the high time, the chance offered by the crisis for living in and going beyond successfully this state of pandemic. Yeah, that's it from us, James.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think we we have a few questions that was sent to us by our viewers beforehand. Let me just go through them. First one, what are your most important recommendations to aircraft operators for the real integration of OCC organizations, processes, and tools? Would you like to take this one, Davide?
Yes, I can. So I think that we have real and unreal integration, as we discussed so far. In many cases, there's this slogan of this I that we discussed. We can say that unreal integration could be understood as the rearrangement of office desks, one bigger unit, or just putting people all together. But the real one comes from preparing the organization, developing a vision and strategy. We mentioned the vision. By improving the processes, simplifying the processes, at the same time setting IT standards, and also putting effort on the people, change management. That's part of the ingredients, I would say, that are needed to move really to a real integration. And all of that doesn't belong to having all the people together. That's really what we think you can do nowadays, and looking also into the future by having this separation that we talked about.
Okay, thank you. The next question, let me just get myself organized. What are the most important organizational prerequisites for continuous improvement in the AIOCC environment? Would you like to take this one, Björn?
Sure, I can. So the prerequisites to actually always focus on one is the preparation of how to implement the processes and have a stick to these processes in for the operations control. So how do they integrate actually what kind of processes you have created and bringing that to life? There is no value about like having a sophisticated system which is actually can handle everything, but if the people don't stick to the processes, there's actually the issue that it is not of a benefit. And I think Davide was telling about that earlier when he spoke about that he was working in a system which offers him a variety of solutions, but at the end he was facing the issue that he didn't even know half of the capabilities. So thinking about that is probably the most of what most people are facing at their work, and how do they bring it to life? So have clear processes implemented and make sure that the people stick to the processes. So in addition with a good reliable operation system.
Okay, thank you very much, Björn. One of the comments that we've received is changing from AIOCC to DIOC, so Decentralized AOC. Do you guys have any comments on this?
Well, I actually think we are talking some of the same language. Decentralized, it's what I would say in my view, there's two-tier.
Right, okay.
It's really going I believe, going in the same direction. But as for OCC, AIOC, there are a lot of different naming. I would say, I assume it's something similar to our concept here.
Okay, very good. We also have a viewer that's asking, what is the expected percentage of flight increases now that EU airports are open, and what is the expected percentage of flights that the airports are open now in the EU?
So let me take that one, as I was speaking about the number of flights earlier. So I think in July is a good month actually to increase traffic when it comes to the touristic destinations, even though the demand is not catching up the same way as the flights are increasing. But you have to keep in mind that roughly in July, most of the airlines are speaking about the 40% of regular traffic they try to bring to life. It's still really depending on how the demand is picking up as well, because currently it's hard to predict how many people are traveling and how many will traveling. They try to increase traffic to 60 to 70% when it comes to destinations, but looking at the frequency, I think that will be the biggest difference to former times. Current frequencies, as I see in that on my favorite Berlin-Frankfurt route, is currently I was used to like flying every hour or every like 30 minutes.
Yes.
And we are now up to four flights a day, which is already an increase from 3 flights earlier. But that even shows us the really low figures we currently having, even though the flights operating are quite okay filled, I would say. But we are still far away from normal traffic figures.
Yeah.
May I add a comment, James?
Of course.
I know that this is the big issue, the big question. So how much the traffic will recover and how to face with this and plan for it. And we have colleagues that have done some webcasts already in this direction. My comment here is that from an ops control perspective, I would be more, allow me to say, relaxed, because the problems that we were used to face in the ops control rooms that were mainly created, at least in the recent years, by traffic congestion. So too much traffic will not show up for some years. I would like to warn the ops control people following us to, let's say, to switch to their focus mainly on implementing some roles that are more relevant for managing the crisis. I would say kind of pandemic control in ops control, in a way that they are on top of anything that happens. We know that many countries issue NOTAMs with regard to closure of the airspace, closure of the airports, or we are also noticing that every country is doing their own way. There's no coordination, basically. So it is very important for protecting the passenger experience as much as we can to have some rules like that in place in the ops control room. Maybe sitting together virtually with the control PACs, let's say the one in charge of controlling the passenger flows, in a way that we can really react and anticipate the problem. That would be much more interesting and much more important than focusing on managing air traffic management delays, slots, and so on, for the next years, for sure.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thanks for that, David. That's a very, very good point. I want to go through this next question. Very, very interesting as well. What do you think the role of automation is in the IOC? Do you think there's a future IOC that can be replaced with an automated IOC with no human intervention? Is that even possible?
It's an interesting question, and there's a lot of research been done in order to speak about an AIOCC. There are colleagues of us working on that topic and try to think about what kind of duties can be removed from the ops controllers in order to reduce their work and to just focus on what is really necessary to focus on. This is something which will be becoming more and more in the future. I'm pretty sure, and to just highlight the ones which somebody really needs to work on and focus on. Nevertheless, what do we learn from the crisis so far is that sometimes, and I think everybody in operations control that knows that sometimes it's the unexpected is happening. Who would have thought about like us talking about a decrease of passenger figures of 90% a year ago? Nobody could have thought about this, and I think in the operational setup there will always be situations where maybe the machines come to a limit, but what we will see is an increase of automation in the ops control, which will support the actual work and maybe reduce the task of an ops controller to just have an oversight about the operations. I think we are not that there already, but there are ideas about how to actually have machine learning systems in place in order
Wow.
to
Okay.
support the decision making.
Wow. Okay. That is extremely interesting because yeah, definitely have not come across this before today, but very interesting. That's the next frontier, I suppose, for the ops control world.
Yep.
So let me move on to the next one. Also, is a very good question. What are the realistic consequences if an aircraft operator cannot adequately manage the change in view of the operational risk, cost of delay, and passenger experience? What are the consequences?
To me or to Bjorn? Well, I take this.
Yeah, go ahead, Davide.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's a kind of, you cannot really provide the service you want, right? Everyone has in mind to protect as much as possible the passenger experience at the same time in a sustainable way, but it's important. It's really important to make all the effort to manage the change towards a more integrated approach to that. If I understand correctly the answer, let me say maybe something different. Part of the change, in my view, it is to move the decision making and maybe rename it instead of decision making unit or something that was part of our slide. Call it risk identification and management. So also, if we are able to change the mindset in that direction, that the duty of the OCC is identifying the risks and managing the risks, I think we do a good job.
Very good. Do you guys think that there would be realistically a COVID-19 passports? Do you think that will become part of the new normal? And what are the airlines doing in order to promote more secure flights for passengers?
It's hard to say if it's going to be like if they're going to be passports introduced. I'm pretty sure we already see that from today that at some countries you're required to prove that you have some kind of vaccine already taken previously, so that you are in a health condition. And funny enough, it's not really funny, but in Germany we see recently that there was an outbreak in one of the states, and people were forced not to go somewhere else, and even were sent back in holiday destinations. So I think what everybody has to prepare, that there will be put measures in place in order to kind of justify that you're allowed to travel. The same way as you're asked to have a passport with you, which identifies you as a person, there may be the requirement to have some kind of a passport or a test result which proves that you're allowed to travel. So that there could be something which could be implemented. And as an airline, you have to be prepared to follow these guidelines and have to think about what does it actually mean to your operation. Because as we talk about the constant change, if there's going to be a part in the world which has a new outbreak, and countries are implementing rules really quickly to really try to avoid people coming from these countries, and may abandon them to actually travel to visit their country. So that will for sure, you will have to deal with the situation about people being refused to entering countries, more inadmissible persons which need to travel back, and it requires more tests as well for the check-in people to really focus a lot on to follow these requirements, which will change quickly.
Very good point. I think we've had a couple of comments in here that saying that ops control will always have a human decision in alternate airfields, NOTAMs, weather and performance, and that human decision will always be present, no matter how automated some parts of the IOC or the OCC will become. That was also your point, right, Björn and Davide?
Let me say that one day will come where most will come.
One day will come. Big call. This is on recording.
By the machines. But we are still pretty far away from that.
Right.
So far, human decision is definitely adding value. And in my view, it will add more and more value if we can get rid of all the routine stuff. This is why it is important to move as much as possible into a management by exception environment. It's easier for some departments, less for others, I know, but the effort should be there. And by starting in doing this exercise, what is routine, what is not routine? And then we can protect and set up, really protect the human decision making, actually, and because we can focus on that.
Yeah, it's definitely you know, like I said before, it's a new frontier for this part, and it's almost like the discussion of like automated cockpits, you know, like where you don't have pilots anymore, you just have machines flying aircraft. But I mean, you really still need a level of human intervention in there to make sure that, you know, there's still a brain behind something when something goes wrong, right? So.
Yeah, but also in that regard, James, I think that decision making will change. In my view, in the next year, we will go more and more toward some collective intelligence.
Okay.
You know, and based on the output and on the outcome of the let's say intelligence provided by the systems. But we have to change. We never have to stay where we are.
Yeah. Let me move on to the next question. Which conditions shall be covered by the IT architecture? What are the most important requirements to be covered is the question.
I think that the importance of the IT architecture is that you make sure that it is a robust environment you're working in. So by limiting the number of systems you're using and having it really good implemented into your processes, where it really provides the information you require as an operational ops controller. So as David said, like the management by exception is something which will be key in the future, and it's important that the IT architecture is robust enough and gives you the solutions and the abilities to really focus on your KPIs, so that you have all the information you require when a decision is needed, so that you know the cost of delay, you know what kind of crew costs are involved, what kind of maintenance costs are involved, and you don't want to like look that up into various systems. So you want to have one robust, like one source of truth which you're referring to. And because you're spending a lot of money if you not have a right system in place and you're not leveraging it to the extent.
No, very good point. The next one that we have received: how would you evaluate the given situation of the average aircraft operator to be ready for change? David, do you want to take this one since it's to do with change management?
Can you say again, please?
The question is, how would you evaluate the given situation of the average aircraft operator to be ready for change?
Well, I think everyone is different. Ready for change is mainly having the mindset, having a need and a mindset for that. So there are regions in the world that are better in that direction because they usually understand they have to. Where people have to adopt the vision and adopt the systems that are coming and the process and so on. Some others are less. So I would say it depends on the individual case.
Okay.
And it is a question about how do we evaluate to see that, like how every average air operator is ready for a change. I think you see that currently because it is a huge change in operation for every operator. Who is managing the crisis well and who's adapting to the quickly changing situations. So we already see in the current situation that who is doing it smartly and who is open for the change and who is like having difficulties.
Okay, very good. Moving on, the next question is, what is the best method to motivate the operational related people towards continuous process improvement? That's a very good question, actually.
It is.
And like, how do you motivate the people? Actually, one thing we have to keep in mind at operations control, you don't want to have a day one every day. Like, I think continuous improvement you have to show your people the benefit of the continuous improvement process. So if you're sitting every day in the same mess and you're not getting it straight, or like solving it properly the next day, you haven't learned anything from it. If the people realize that, okay, there was the bad situation yesterday, we evaluated and thought about like how to do it better, and we do it right at the next day, and the people see the benefit out of it, I think they realize that like the continuous improvement of decision making will help you to have an easier job. And if the job is easier for you, and it's much easier to solve the issues you're facing every day, that will motivate you. I'm really sure.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a unique situation, right? Because the environment that the OCC is in, it's basically, I mean, to someone like me, it just feels like it's firefighting all the time. So a lot of times you need to keep the motivation of the people up a lot, right?
Absolutely, it's a challenge you always have with your employees. It's just like, how do you keep them motivated? It's the same question, I think, which comes to every employee, and
that's very true.
something you're facing in the operations control is nothing unique.
Yes, that is very true. I think we probably have time for just one more question. Could you please describe the speed of change for organizations, processes, and tools, also in view of digitalization?
Speed of change. Well, also here, I think we need to think about some indicators for this. Speed of change depends on what you really mean with that. If it is adoption of the systems, or adoption of new processes and procedures, this is what needs to be defined, I would say, in terms of speed of change. So in my view, this is something that has to do with what you're changing.
Yeah.
And
okay.
as well, what is available on the market. I think, as we were talking about in AIOCC on previously, are we there yet? Not really. But there will be a change, and there will be more automation to come, and that will increase the speed as well.
Very good. I think just in view of the time, I think we'll cut it there for the Q&A. Thank you everyone for your contribution and your questions. If you have any more questions, please do not hesitate to be in touch with us directly. We will be more than happy to go into a discussion with you, on a one-on-one basis. Let me just move on to the next slide. So here at Lufthansa Systems, in airline consulting department, we obviously offer a suite of different consulting products to help airlines and operators navigate this very difficult time. Not only on the operational control areas, but also in other areas, basically all areas of an airline, including network alignment, MRO, management, pandemic, MRO recovery, and customer confidence recovery. So, we do have the product ready, and we're happy to speak to you about it if you need any more information on this. We do also have more sessions coming up. Just remember that we will have the recording of today's session on our website on www.lhsystems.com, as well as recordings of our past online conferences in the areas of crisis recovery, as we mentioned, airline alliances and partnerships, and network planning and reforecasting. As I mentioned, in August and September, we will have several new online conferences in the areas of customer experience, maintenance, cybersecurity as well. Please stay tuned and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter for the most up-to-date information on these. So thank you all very much again. Thank you, Björn. Thank you, Davide, for the great session. And I wish you all have a brilliant rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you.